Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you're tuning in. We are Slava and Jonathan, bringing you the Side Quest podcast, where we talk about character development, stories, and all things that are world building. And we occasionally take side quests, because, frankly, that's how conversations work. Just as a reminder, this whole show is spoiler heavy. So sit back, tune in, and join us on this episode of Side Quest. Well. If we don't have the two saucy Skysworn back for another episode of Side Quest.
Which one of us is the sauciest?
I don't want to make a judgment call on that, but it's Spenser.
Definitely.
So one's saucy and one's salty. I'll be the salty one.
That's checks out a lot. You use a lot of salt in your cooking.
Yep.
I don't even have to be there, and I can feel the salt oozing off of you in our episodes. In fun news, I turned a friend of mine onto our podcast here, specifically on Roadside Picnic, Slava. I was grabbing breakfast with him, and I was like, oh yeah, I do this podcast every week, whatever. He's like, oh, what's it about? Because we were talking about the books we're reading, and I was like, telling him about Roadside Picnic. And he's like, oh, send it to me. So he listens to Roadside Picnic, loves the show, and he dove in and saw we did Liza Locklamora because he's read all three of them. Spenser knows this guy. He has been going through it, and he absolutely just loves the show. It's fun to have someone go through it because they also read the same types of fantasy books and things like that. And so I asked if he wanted to join us, possibly on Words of Radiance because he's a big Cosmere guy too, and possibly on the second Lives of Locklamora book. So we'll see if we can get Will on here, William. But it's just fun seeing that there's other people who are interested in talking about the same things because they read these books themselves and then they have no one to talk to about them. So we need to come together. We need to become our own Skysworn.
I've met people who I've told about the podcast who've become like huge fans of it on my end here too. So it's fun watching that. Then they come back to you the next week and like, oh, when you talked about that, that's so exciting. I really like that episode. I really connected with your guys' discussion on it specifically because I'm thinking of a guy from my circle that really is enjoying the hell out of it.
Spenser won't tell you this, but he did tell me this offline that his mom and his sister get together once a week to listen to the latest episode drop. It's usually Tuesday mornings over breakfast. So they can really
listen to it as it drops.
Make some comments about it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Sorry, Spenser, I just really feel like the audience needed to know that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That bit of manufactured truth.
Hey, someone's got to do it. If not me, then who?
That's true. Someone's got to keep me moving along in life.
Yeah. But that explains...
You're getting up to pace?
What's happening on the analytics side. Because I've noticed a bunch of the older episodes are getting extra downloads. Stuff that hasn't been touched by the audience in months are popping up on metrics. But before we get into it, adventurers, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a side quest.
You know, I just realized we should probably have Spenser do the intro also, so that we have both the intro and the outro that we can just kind of slap in whenever we feel like it, whenever we feel like we miss him, and then he can forget the name on the front end too. Just hit that.
That way you
just
can
send him a cue card that says side quest on it, so whenever he reads the outro, he knows what show he's on.
I'll use AI though, and it'll spell it wrong, so that he just goes sideways, and he'll do it with his 6 fingers on his one hand.
Because I'm sure your listeners would just love to hear me mess up on both the front end of the show and the back end of the show. So
the listeners are here for the lulls. You don't know that, but they all used a monkey's paw to wish their son back to life.
And now they can never unsubscribe from SideQuest.
Oh, that'd be great, though. Man, what a different world we would live in if all of your actions were permanent and irreversible.
Dude.
Oof. Woof.
So,
did I just...
I think I kind of make out 50-50 in the end, I guess.
How do you make out, Spenser?
Man, I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I do. I don't know if I would do really well with that option or non-option rather.
Now, do the consequences of those actions, are they permanent? And let me dive deeper into it to explain what I mean. You subscribe to a podcast, you can never unsubscribe. Doesn't mean you listen to it, but you can never unsubscribe, right? That's what the rules of it, right?
Right.
So how far does that go? Do you eat a bad piece of fruit and then you're sick forever? You have a stomachache for the rest of your life? Does this permeate every single level of life to the molecular?
Well, it couldn't, or the experiment wouldn't have some sort of prolonged longevity, right? Because the first piece of food that you eat would just keep you healthy forever, right? Like, because most likely the first piece of food you eat is not going to be raw fish that's got a disease on it, right? Okay, so maybe it's not that you can never unsubscribe, but that time taken for things to take effect is so slow, it's like 1/8%. So like when you do something like subscribe, it stays that way and there's just a lag to get to the next part. And so you're actually living life both in real time and slow motion for your choices. Sorry, the consequences of your choices. I'm doing a data and decisions class in my MBA right now, and so we're doing linear regressions and pattern recognition on data. The one that I was doing last night, and I have 20 lessons left before my exam that was supposed to be last week, is there were these like late patterns where it's like every quarter, blah, 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 but then the next quarter drops heavily. And it was like this 3-month lag. So all of your consequences have a 3-month lag on them affecting you. So you could use Tinder and sleep around, but at the end of 3 months, you might have 6 STDs.
I feel like that's just how real life works too.
That's just because you don't go to doctors. That's a you problem.
Well, I'm not admitting that I have 6 STDs. I'm just saying that's how real life works. You can go to Tinder for 6 months and then wake up with 6 STDs.
Why do you know that?
Well, Jonathan just told me.
Oh, okay. For the audience who can't see us, Slava and I are wearing the same color.
No one gave me the memo that it's blue plaid day.
Go quick, Spencer, switch shirts.
This is our Tinder profile shirts. Aren't you on Grindr?
Okay, I just have more.
Which one are you on? I forgot. Are you on all of them?
This is like those job applications where it's like, are you a veteran?
Quick
Do you have a disability? Tell me more about yourself. And I always say, I choose not to answer. I do not disclose. It changes. From
I saw a
day
funny thing while scrolling on the interwebs. It was a screenshot of a text conversation, and it could have been fake. It doesn't matter. It's a funny bit. And the first text is, "Just want you to know I'm not gay." Second response was, "Dude, this is Grindr." And he's like, oh, okay, I see how it is. So if I was lactose intolerant, I couldn't walk down a milk aisle. I was like...
And this episode's now not safe for work. Thank you, Slava. That's good.
So Skysworn.
That's good.
Skysworn. Where are we at?
Yes, let's swear our Skysworn ideals.
We do have Spenser on. I know we kind of briefly mentioned him in the intro. But let's get his usual spiel on the book. Likes, dislikes, what he thought when he first read it. Then we'll get into some of the details.
Yeah, so I think I first read this book. It's coming up on a year. I don't exactly remember the time. I remember we finally got to the big fight between Jai Long and Lindon, and I feel like has been getting set up for a while at this point. So that was a good fight. I did not expect Lindon to lose an arm. I don't know if I expected him to win the fight. I expected...
That's true, too.
expected Ethan to somehow come in and save the day, kind of based on previous interactions with him. If I remember correctly, he was there, but I don't know if he really intervened at all. So yeah, that was definitely unexpected. Like, oh, that'll be interesting to see how Lindon recovers from losing an arm. That was cool then to see him. I think he starts working with Fisher Gesha at some point to make himself a new arm with, I don't know, some new bindings and I forget what else off the top of my head.
Yaren kind of feels sorry for Lindon, and that's something I mentioned in the previous episode, that there's like a more of a camaraderie, like a sisterly love for Lindon in this book. But the point is, she feels really bad for him losing an arm. She goes, I know how it is to lose limbs. But fortunately, my master had pills that could help me grow back the limbs. I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Something that I wish was explored a little bit more, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of stuff like that that's not explored because there's so many different paths that people can take. I feel like there's a lot left unexplored with other people's paths and how the magic works for other people, not just Lindon or Yaren or, you know, our main characters that we see. Like when Lindon he explores, I think it's like in the first or second book, the group, I'm blanking on their name, the group that he meets near the end, might even be book one, but there's like a bunch of artifacts and stuff that he's
Heaven's Glory School?
trying to explore. That's it, Heaven's Glory School. And I think he's offered like to take one artifact out of there or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, low tier artifact.
Yeah, but like the artifacts is another really interesting side quest, if you will, that doesn't get explored a whole lot. At least in my opinion. Like you said, Yaren mentions this pill that regrew her arm. You're like, oh, well, how are these made? Where do these come from? You know, that'd be cool to learn more about.
Yeah, for sure. But sorry, Spence, I interrupted you. Continue. Back to you.
Thought it was pretty cool that Lindon starts working with Fisher Gesha and to create a new arm. Didn't realize that was something that was possible until they started doing that. So I thought that was pretty cool. One thing I thought also was interesting is we continue to see Jai Long and his sister Jai Chen. We continue to see their story even after the fight. I wasn't expecting that, so I was curious as to what their purpose was going to be going forward in the story.
Yeah, that's kind of unique, right? Will doesn't necessarily keep characters in that he's not going to bring back at some point. And so having these moments where Jai Long and his sister are introduced in book 2, at the end of book 2, book 3, we still get the lead up to the fight, but Lindon has helped his sister get some of her Madra channels back. Book 4, they have the fight, and now they're running away from the Bleeding Phoenix. They don't want Lindon's help because Jai Long can't be bothered to be helped by anyone because he just constantly thinks that everyone else is playing a trick on him, which I think says a lot more about him than it does anyone else. Seeing those little moments with him is curious because, like, he destroyed him in the battle, so why not just go with him? Like, you know you can beat him again. He didn't stand a chance. Just go with him, right? Like, anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
No, all good. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't recall the Skysworn just seemed to kind of come out of nowhere. So that was interesting to me. Like all of a sudden this new sort of, I don't know if people group is the right word, but a whole new set of characters just gets introduced into the world. Obviously the name of the book is Skysworn. But like
ding, ding, ding.
But who are they? What is their purpose? We do figure that out. They're sort of like a police force. That's kind of how I see them.
Narugwe come in book 3, though? I thought we met him once before, but just
it might have been near the end of the book because Lindon starts on his Black Flame path, and they are concerned about that because it's been, I don't know if it's been a dead path, but no one's really used it in a long time because of how dangerous it can be. And so I think they come in. Yeah, that's right. They come in and they take him into custody, I guess. They're afraid of Lindon, I think, to be honest, because of what
because of what he could become.
Yeah, exactly what he could become. So
let me just touch on this. You said that the Skysworn kind of get dropped in, right? Do you enjoy Will kind of just like, boop, new world piece, unexplained, you'll figure it out as we go? Did you like that? Because he's done that a few times, I feel like, and he's going to do it more because that's the style of writing that he has.
I don't know. Sometimes I like it. Sometimes it can be a little much, just for me personally, in my opinion, because I'm still trying to figure out. I still feel like there's more yet to be told of already what is going on currently, and then all of a sudden we have a new set of characters or events that just all of a sudden appear out of nowhere to then try to deal with, and we still haven't explored everything else or gotten enough information about what's already going on. At least that's for me. I would sometimes like a little bit more information about who's who and and what's going on before we just, let's just add in this new event, these new characters, try to figure out.
Spencer wants the Encyclopedia of Cradle.
I do
Volume 1.
actually. That would be really cool. You have a lot more context to the situation.
You and everybody
Yep.
else. Would you play a tabletop role-playing game if it was set in the world that is Cradle?
I don't know. I don't know if I would ever. I don't think I've ever played a role-playing tabletop game before. So I don't know if I would really be interested in a Cradle series one right off the bat. I might want to try something else to get my feet wet first before that.
It's funny you should say that. They're dropping the Stormlight Archives tabletop role-playing game. I'm so glad that you're interested. I'll keep you posted.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Glad to know. Looking forward to it.
Looking forward to doing something else that you told me that I have to do.
You're going to buy that for me, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Since I'm giving you the leather bound.
Yeah, it's a fair
sweet.
trade. It's a fair trade. Slava, what do you think about Will Wight's writing style where he just drops in new elements of the world unprovoked and unannounced? Where it's just like, boom, this thing exists. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. We're just going to go.
I'm torn, I guess would be the best answer, because most of the time I go with the flow. I don't mind it. Yep, we're in a new thing. This thing is happening, and I'm either not invested enough in that little detail because I'm invested in the bigger story, or I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that it'll be explained later. On the other side of this coin is there's some things that I would want to know more about. A little bit more explanation, like the cult of the Red Phoenix, or the pill that helped Yaren grow back a limb. Which limb did she lose? When did she lose it? I wish there was a few more paragraphs on that. But overall, his style is just fine. Like the fast pace, I'm okay with it. I mean, it's different than Sanderson or King or any of the other writers we've covered on the podcast, but judging him not in respect to anybody else, but just as a writer, here's his style, take it or leave it, I'll take it. I like it.
One thing I liked about this, too, is we got to find out more about Yaren's, her blood shadow.
Mm-hmm.
We've been given hints of that along the way, and we finally got to see a little bit more like what that's all about. Which, to be honest with you, I still, even after reading the series, that whole thing still doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, how blood shadows work. There's one of those things where I'd like the encyclopedia to know more about. But it definitely adds a unique element to the story. So I appreciated that. It was cool to read about. And it just gives Yaren a little bit more personality. We get to see her open up a little bit more to Lindon. And that's something that I had been waiting to see. I really feel like they start to bond here. Lindon and Ethan, they start to feel like a group of friends.
For sure.
So that's cool to see them coming together as a group of friends.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that on the last episode, if you remember, Jonathan, that it seemed that they're all building bonds, closer bonds. Their bond is being strengthened. It is definitely shown by Yaren's softening towards Lindon, Lindon's ability to talk back to Ethan and say, like, hey, what the flipping flip? My arm. You just let that happen. And Ethan even feeling a little sorry. Like, it was genuine. It wasn't just, a little tickle behind his ear. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. He actually felt genuinely upset about what his actions led to. And Fisher Gesha defending Lindon. So there seemed to be a strengthening of their friendships. And I thought that was really cool. That's something that I thought was I don't want to say long overdue, but a little overdue. But maybe in Will's mind, this is where it had to happen after the big fight. And that's fine. But I thought that was a neat part of the book.
Yeah.
There is, too, something to be said about going through trauma together that creates a sort of bond and
Yes.
creates closer relationship. Suffering brings us together, when we have to go through those things together. Maybe that's why Will, at this point, is decided, like, this is where this is going to happen. Because we haven't seen a whole lot of... I mean, yeah, they definitely experience a lot of stuff together before this, but that was one thing where it just all of a sudden seemed to create a turning point of like, oh, we're in this together, we're friends. Like, I didn't realize that until now, but we're friends because of this super intense moment where Lindon could have died, and then all of a sudden Ethan and Yeren both realize that and are like, oh, well, maybe we need to take this more seriously.
Yeah. I think one of the things I mentioned to Slava in the last episode or 2 episodes ago was, if this book came out as a standalone and I was like following the series and it was the newest book, I would feel let down by it because it's just not enough information on anything. But because we have an additional 8 books where you can just keep reading, it's like, well, all right, it's a minor slowdown, feels like a setup for Ghostwater, and you just keep moving on. But I think one of the elements that makes it feel like the weakest book of the series is it feels like an interlude, and it feels like the setup for Ghostwater. It's the only book that doesn't feel self-contained, right? Where if you just pick this book up, you'd be like, oh, I mean, stuff happened, but I don't know a whole lot about any of the characters. Nobody really feels like they moved forward or developed necessarily. And it had the potential for that, I think, to be like a book that focused primarily on Yeren, but it just didn't happen. And I don't know when this came out for Will's career versus like what other books he was writing or whatever, if he was on a time crunch or whatnot. So I really have no idea. It really feels like it could have been better. I still really like the book, but it just felt like it could have been strengthened in a few different ways.
That makes sense. And we did talk about this, I think, in the second episode, Jonathan, where it's almost between a rock and a hard place for Will Wight. Because this does seem like an interlude, but do you put the fight at the end of Black Flame and leave it hanging with Lindon with no arm and go into this, and then take the first 2 chapters of Ghostwater and put an end of this? Well, that kind of screws up Ghostwater then. Leaves Skysworn hanging on chapter 2 of Ghostwater, and you're like, oh, okay, well, last book was an amazing cliffhanger. Here we're kind of in the middle of a conversation, but you're almost kind of stuck if you're Will Wight here. Where do you put the fight?
Yeah, and I mentioned this to Spencer briefly before we started recording about the anime comments that I made, where, because that's what led into this, where it's like, where do you move specific plot moments?
Right.
And do you have it as a bleed in of a high action piece and then a low drop down of my
your anime,
very peculiar anime choices?
Yeah, that anime for 13-year-olds that you've been watching and taking notes on.
What was it?
37 episodes?
This is America.
2 journals. How do they?
I would appreciate
transfer powers in this book again.
They swap spit. They swap spit. I don't appreciate you bringing up my journals on live TV here, so I'm going to set a new boundary. No, you're not allowed to read my journals and then talk about them publicly.
Fair enough.
But yes, I did study. I almost dropped my coffee on my lap. I did study this anime Sekirei for its intros and outros because I was like, why is this so entertaining? Why is this show so interesting and keeping interesting? Is not the word I want to use.
Engrossing?
Yeah, I was studying why the show was so captivating besides the big bosom babes. I can't. I've had to say this 4 times, audience, because Slava and I just keep laughing. But it's like, okay, yeah, I was young, but like there's something engaging about the story as well. And it was, after my study, it was the action on the front end of the episodes and the cliffhanger on the back end leaves you wanting more. And that was the short synopsis of it, if I can sum it up into 3 sentences.
Right.
Do you feel better about making fun of me on live TV here?
A little bit. But now all that fun, I forgot the point. Okay, so Lindon, Will Wight, hard place, boobs.
Hard place. We've degraded, and I blame Slava for this.
I'm gonna have to do a lot of editing on this one, Slava.
Oh my lord! You couldn't have just said breasts like a normal human being.
Shit. I'm trying to be funny.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense, and I think anime shows do that, whether they're big-breasted, whatever aliens that swap spit with you, or Death Note that's more serious, or Trigun, there's oftentimes a really good cliffhanger. Even if it lulls sort of in the middle and there's exposition and a lot of talking, there's always a good cliffhanger to get you back. So I think that anime is known for that, and that's why I enjoy watching anime. One of the reasons, also for the stories, but I like the pacing of anime. I think it's really well done for a lot of it. At least the shows I like, right? And that's why I watch them, because I like them. But this particular one seems like, and I hate saying this because I don't want to just dump on Will Wight, because I think it's still a decent book. Because when you look back through it, and we've mentioned a few things that are really interesting in this book, that are fun. They're good plot points. They're captivating, to use your word, Jonathan. But it still feels like a middle of a episode in the middle of a season that's kind of like, the writers were, tired before their summer break. And that's not an insult. I really, really don't, to all the fans out there who love Will Wight, I'm not saying that to dump on him. It just, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because it starts off with that fight and then lulls, and then there's a couple of big things that happen really, really fast, like you said, and then it's over.
Oh, yeah, that's an observation. I didn't think about that because I was talking about the action-oriented lead-in and then the cliffhanger on the back end. There's no cliffhanger on the back end on here, and the biggest action-packed thing is the fight at the beginning, and then after that it's just kind of downhill.
Yeah, downhill. And then there's like stuff that happens on its way downhill, like everybody falling off the cloud, Bleeding Phoenix coming, Erin's uninvited guest overtaking her, and then she overtakes him. Then with Lindon's arm, he gets 3 to choose from. He chooses the one that he thinks is the best. Orthos gives him some shit for it. Yaren makes fun of him a little bit and says, oh, wow, at least it looks scary. So there's that part of the story where we're kind of back to normal. And then Ethan fights that underlord from the cult. So there's things that happen on its way down, but because it's so fast, you almost breeze by them. Does that make sense? Do you guys agree? They're both nodding yes, audience.
Yeah, I agree with that. I remember, Jonathan, you told me, I think when I was first reading the series, is like you feel like books 3 and 4 were kind of like one book. Book 4 was almost forgettable in a sense because of like how little action there is in it, and so you always confuse events as to like, was that in book 3 or was that in book 4, because it might actually even be the shortest one in the series. If not, it's got to be one of the shortest. At the time when I was reading, and I was like, oh, that doesn't really make sense to me yet. But now that I've read the whole series, I'm like, oh yeah, because getting ready for this podcast, I was like, oh yeah, I don't remember much of what happened in this book. But I remember Ghostwater, and I remember Black Flame, but Skysworn, I don't remember a whole lot of, other than the big fight that happens near the beginning. Yeah, it makes sense what you're saying.
All right, Spencer, I want to shift gears for just a second here and talk about something Jonathan and I touched on briefly, but I don't think enough in the previous episode, because we didn't know what to do with it. Maybe you can help us dissect this, is Machiel's playing around with fate. What are your thoughts on that portion of the book? Because it's there, but it's like one of those things that's put in by Will, and then we move on. And I don't think it's explored enough. Maybe it will be later through other events that happen that show the consequences of this, more so than in here. But talk to us about that.
Yeah, so seeing the Abaddon is another thing that I personally would like to see more of, that we don't really see. Yeah, like you said, we get these snippets. He just drops in there, and you're like, oh, what's this all about? I would personally like to see that explored more. And even though I have read the entire series, I still feel like there's so much more that could have been said in regards to the Abaddon. But with Machiel here, I think there's a point where he can't see further. He can see into the future, but with Cradle, his perception is limited. And I don't know if we get a reason why. Something to do with Serial. I think changing Lindon's fate. It's somehow messed up what Machiel could see.
Right, because you only see it for 30 years at a time now.
Yep.
Yep.
But the Bleeding Phoenix starts to take notice and starts to wake up because of what Machiel is doing.
Mm-hmm.
It appears to be he's messing with the fate, or with the world's fate. And the Bleeding Phoenix takes notice. So it stands to reason that there's some sort of connection between the Dread Gods and, I believe, the Abaddon, if that's what Machiel is. So, yeah, really interesting. We don't really get any more information than that. A lot of these snippets of the Abaddon, specifically more serial than any of the others throughout the series. But it's one of those things where I wish we could have more background as to what's going on with her and the rest of the Abaddon.
Yeah.
And there might be a specific thing that Will's trying to do. It's like not give us too much information, like just kind of keep sprinkling this together to keep us hooked. And it definitely kept me hooked, that's for sure. So maybe it worked, but I wish we could have a little bit more of knowing what's going on behind the scenes.
And I think that's part of the game that we all play as readers and writers, where the writer gives us just a little bit, just enough of the morsels to keep us going. Having said that, and having read as many books as I have, and even having attempted to write one, and I'm not trying to get up my own ass with that statement, it's just, it is what it is. I've tried. It seems that there's some things that just could be explained more, and it wouldn't take away from the mystery of the Cradle series or the Stormlight Archives or anything else if there was a bigger backstory of character X, wherever that might be, and a bigger story about a more specific example, the pills that helped Yeren regrow her arm, or more of a reason why Azrael left earlier on. He wants to reclaim some of the worlds that have been left to rot. He wants to fix some of the worlds that have been destroyed by the Abaddon's machinations, whatever their either hands-on or hands-off approach, whatever they feel like at that time. If that was dumped on me in book one, because Azrael's kind of introduced in book one, it wouldn't ruin the book for me. It's not like it's such the important, well, it is important, but it's not such a plot-breaking spoiler that it wouldn't have worked in book one. And now it's in book four. I'm like, okay, I get it. And this kind of goes back on just a quick parenthetical note to the fight that Jonathan and I always have. Give me more about specifically Stormlight Archives. Because
I've converted him.
Getting a little bit more about Shallan that I won't read maybe till book four. I don't need the whole book explained to me, but getting a little bit more here so I understand the context helps me enjoy the current book I'm in. And that aside, I think if Will Wight dumped a little bit more details throughout the first four books, it would have been more enjoyable. But then as I'm saying that, I revert back to what I said about 10, 15 minutes ago. I still enjoyed the book. It's not like it's a horrible book. It's great. But as you read it more and more, and being the nitpickers that we are, you start seeing where there might be less meat on the bone than there could have been.
Mystery provokes us to go on a journey to find answers.
Yep.
I have a surprise for both of you.
Oh, no.
About Skysworn. In particular, it's the untold behind the scenes from Will Wight himself. I found it during my discovery phase of Skysworn, and I'm going to read you something. Quite frankly, I don't remember much about the writing process of Skysworn, so I'll just give you a few tidbits and then a deleted scene. Tidbits. The Winter Sage was originally going to show up in this book, trying to take Yeren. The middle of the book was going to revolve around a soul-smithing arc for Lindon, and the book was originally going to start with a Cradle myth coming to life. The Jester Twins. The Jester Twins are a pair of highly developed ancient dream spirits. One white with a black mask that has a white smile painted on it. One black with a white mask with a black frown painted on it. The black mask gives gifts, and the white mask sets a price. On new moons, the gift is cursed. On full moons, the price is light. When both masks are smiling, they give a gift for a price and an answer for an oath. When both masks are frowning, they steal a prized possession and place a curse. The Black Flame Empire was going to be visited by these wandering Santa knockoffs, and Lindon would go to them for a gift in order to defeat Jylong. But the obligation that came along with that would have complicated his life throughout the book. I don't remember if I came up with this for a specific nature of that complication or if I abandoned this plot element as unnecessary too early on. The Jesters were a device I planned all the way back in Unsold and kept it looking for an opportunity to use it, but it felt weird to introduce a new legend and have it come into play in Lindon's life out of nowhere. So it went unused, but I still like the image.
Interesting.
My understanding of this backstory that he shares here is there's a lot of editing that went into Skysworn, and I think a lot got taken out.
That makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess I don't really have any further thoughts on that, but thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that would have been a great story for this book. It just doesn't seem to fit the genre.
Which part?
The two masked entities.
The Jester twins?
I mean, I've seen anime where
we covered that.
It covers. Yeah, right. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. It was well covered, or well uncovered.
We smeared it all over. Okay.
Right.
I'll be over here being quiet. Yep. Thanks.
So I've seen anime that incorporates Western motifs or themes, or even visually, it looks like it's in England or a Western European city, an anime set in something that looks like a European city, but it's definitely Japanese stories being told. Here, progression anime, I think that character, which for me conjures up something very Western, very like gothic, horror-esque, would not fit in a progression fantasy for me. It'd be weird. So I'm kind of glad that he cut that.
It could have fit at the end of the book as the cliffhanger. But here's the thing, right? So we see 3 tidbits here that he took out of really strong threads that could have been used. Didn't have to be used, but could have been used. The Winter Sage was originally going to show up in this book to take Yaren away. We don't meet the Winter Sage until Wintersteel. Is that right? Uncrowned.
Yes, I think Uncrowned. Yeah, because that's the big...
Because Wintersteel is the action of her acting out the whatevers.
Yeah, because the Winter Sage comes to...
Don't give away spoilers! Limit.
For the thing.
Yes, I'm just looking for the placement. Yes, for the thing. Thank you. Yes. So that's like a strong thread that could have happened. Because the Winter Sage is a Sword Sage. There's more than one, apparently. We find that out in this book when Narogwe is hassling Lindon. Then there's this middle of the book having a soul-smithing arc for Lindon, which could have been interesting because he's takes after his mother in that way. And then I think that the Jester twins could have fit at the end where Lindon is trying to find a way to help Yaren fight the Bleeding Phoenix or something like that. And then the Jester twins show up for the Aurelius family. And then he gets this item or whatever that is then cursed and blah, 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 blah. So I think it could have worked. When you're writing these books, you're so in it that you can't always take a step back, and you need people like me to come in. And I know that sounds lofty, but I'm all right with it. So,
don't break your arm trying to pat yourself on the back.
Can you put a new one on, or is that just in books?
Well, there's a pill for that.
Is it Ubik?
Could be. If you don't know what Ubik is, Spencer, it's a book about the future, written in the 1960s about the future, where people can be suspended in half-life after they die and have communications with the real world. But things go awry, and then the main characters, there's a handful of them. They happen to be in an accident, which we don't know if they were killed or not, and we don't know if they're really in half-life or in the real world, or which one of them is dead and which one of them is alive, who's contacting who.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks for the context. I've never heard of that book, but it does sound very intriguing.
It is. I would say if you're a Philip K. Dick novice or you've never heard of Philip K. Dick, it wouldn't be the book I would start with, unless Spence is something like that kind of stuff intrigues you.
Was he the author of that
He
story?
was the author. Yep.
Okay.
So my suggestion for the Philip K. Dick universe is A Scanner Darkly. That's a really interesting book. It's more grounded in its story, but it still deals with a lot of stuff that Philip K. Dick likes to talk about. Nature of reality, government control, a lot of drug use. Like there's themes that overlap. And if you like that and you want to go really weird, Ubik is the next one.
Gotcha. Nice. Yeah, I've started reading The Man in the High Castle
Right.
by him. So
Okay.
And then there was a while back, Amazon actually did an anthology series based off of some of his short stories.
Right.
And I watched the episodes and found the episodes pretty interesting. So that's kind of what got me into his stories. But because he wrote at a different time, it's a little harder for me to get into his writing style. But the stories are The Man in the High Castle is a very interesting story. I haven't seen the show that Amazon made about that book, but I know a lot of people liked it.
Yeah. My wife watched it. She said she liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ubik was never made into a movie or a TV show or any sort of show. It was tried by a few directors, but none of them could see how they could make it visually without repeat. How did they work? I forget. How did I word it, Jonathan? There was I watched one director and he was confused as to how to make Ubik visually appealing. And so many other movies had already borrowed themes and ideas from Ubik that it would be just a repeat of stuff.
Well, I went on a long rant about this in the Ubik episode, which I won't repeat here. But you should go and listen to it because we retell Shakespearean's plays in different contexts all the time.
Yep.
So it's possible this person was just lazy, and I'm not concerned about saying that.
Yep. Well, even in something that's more popular and modern, sitcoms, like the good ones, they're always a formula that repeats. There's people that are close together, put in different situations, and they're forced to react to those situations. And it's okay to tell stories over and over again as long as you present them well and put them in maybe a different world and try to avoid repetition of other shows, but still tell the story of Ubik. Since we're talking about Ubik, it'll be fine. Anyway, so back to Skysworn. And I think the segue here is world building, something that we've talked about a lot on the show. Authors in general, they have to create a world to put their characters in. And Philip K. Dick wrote about our contemporary world, and he had a different view of it. He put a different twist on our real world, so it's very familiar. Now, a series like Cradle is a totally different universe, made-up world with characters that are not like us. They're maybe unfamiliar to us, even though they have the same traits as humans, and we can relate to them, obviously, because they're put through different trials, just as we are here in the real world. And I think it takes an immense amount of effort and talent to create a world as Will Wight did. That's not to denigrate Philip K. Dick re-envisioning our world. But if we were to re-envision the Cradle, is there anything that you guys would change? How would you, even better, not change, how would you rebuild the world of Cradle if you had to? Just a little fun brain experiment. Spencer, what do you think?
Well, just I guess going off of, things that I've shared before about where we only get snippets of certain things that I'd want to know more about. I don't know, it feels a little bit weird for me to maybe critique a book where I've never written anything before, like a book before. So it feels weird for me to try to hey, there's what I would do better because I've never written. But I'd maybe add in a little bit more about the Abaddon. And it might be tricky to do without giving away too much of what he wanted to do later on in the story. But yeah, I'd like to give maybe a little bit more backstory to what's going on behind the scenes. And maybe at the end, give more of some sort of a cliffhanger. Build up to something more near the end. And he kind of did the fight between Akura Malice and the Bleeding Phoenix. But that wasn't really Lindon or Yaren or Athan doing that. That was them just kind of sort of waiting out the battle. So it wasn't our main characters really experiencing. I mean, yeah, they were probably afraid. That wasn't our main characters experiencing the main fight. So it wasn't a huge cliffhanger for the characters themselves. And we weren't super invested, or at least I didn't feel super invested in the fight between Malice and the Bleeding Phoenix because, well, one, we hadn't really met Malice up to that point, I think, except for maybe Athan meets with her. But she's just kind of this sort of background character, and then all of a sudden she's expected to do this big fight. So it would have been cool to maybe see our main characters interact more near the end of the book. Well, like in a big sort of, climatic battle of some sort. Yeah, that's my personal opinion.
What say you, Jonathan?
I think that the story does decent in the first 3 books. Book 4, as we talked about the details there already, I would have fluffed it up. I would have added a couple more threads to bolster the story. But something else I would have done with the series so far is done something similar to Sanderson, which is I would have spent a fair amount of time writing mythos and side stories and then released them to the audience, either happening elsewhere in the world between books 1 and 2 or books 2 and 3, and maybe do like a short story between books 1 and 2, 2 short stories between 2 and 3, 3 short stories between 3 and 4, something to like add into the world, little more snippets, like this 2 Jester Mask thing. Think it's a great idea. Could have worked in the world. Doesn't have to be fit into main story. Can be fit somewhere else. There's even a new character we're going to meet next book, Ghostwater, named Zeal, who I absolutely love, and he's part of the Beast Tamer path, and for all conversation purposes, he's a Pokemon trainer. That's what that was supposed to be, but he is actually a shattered human being because of reasons that we'll find out later. More on what he was like in his heyday, and more on what his master was like, because he has a master that we don't know almost anything about for the whole 12 books. Things like that I would do a lot more in the side story realm and explore things, because in marketing, something that you want to do is do a lot of experiments and iterate quickly to see what works. And one of the ways you can do that in authorship is release a bunch of short stories and see which one people really want to know more about, and then like follow that path until people feel bored of it, and then you go do a different thing because people want more of the thing, which is why Will put a cap on his first 12 books, because he was done with it. But then he came back for Cradle specifically. And then he did a Kickstarter a couple months ago where he was trying to get Unsold turned into an anime. He did not raise as much as he thought he would. I was not surprised by that, because Will has not cultivated the level of fandom that Sanderson has. So like his big number that he really wanted to hit was like 14 million, and he got 1.2 barely. It was like 4 days before, and the Kickstarter was not yet funded for $1 million. What he did is he committed to writing another Cradle book, and it's going to be a bunch of short stories of things that are happening to characters that are not necessarily the ones that we know in the main story, but they could be. And it happens before Waybound, not after. That got everyone to help commit the last 200,000 to the campaign. And it's like, your audience, and this is like a clear example 1-to-1 with Will and Cradle. Your audience wants more of Cradle. You were trying to do a Kickstarter to build an anime from book 1. It didn't make it. You're 4 days short. You need 200 grand. What does he do? Hey, if we get the Kickstarter, I'll write a new Cradle book. And everyone's like, oh my God, here's money. Because the people want more Cradle. This is what marketing 101. What do the people want? Give it to them. That's it. So that's what I would do. But the way that you find that out, to tie this back to the beginning, is you do experiments with a bunch of short stories here and there to say, hey, what do people find interesting? And then you move that direction.
Yeah, makes sense. I would add more story to each book. And let me expand on what I mean by that. So, a combination of both your ideas. There's an anime that I've mentioned numerous times. It's called Monster. It's like 72 episodes. and it follows a doctor. And I'm not going to get into the intricacies of the plot because we'll go off course again, but it follows a doctor. But then it also follows a bunch of subplots and characters that are briefly introduced throughout the story. They're given 2 or 3 episodes of just them. I think to expand on the world, to expand on some of the magic that Spencer's talking about, and to put in some short stories, take a book or two, or even part of a book, and go off and let's visit a different character. And I don't think that will distract or take away from the story if the story is this overarching narrative of the world of Cradle, and if the character is not some side character going fishing, that's a silly example, but nothing like that. But it's a character that is part of this world and is part of the bigger thing that's happening with the Abaddon and Cradle, but maybe he or she meets Lindon later on, or him and Lindon are just in the same room or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If they're an integral part to the story, I think readers will follow their story down a little path, down a little side quest, and then come back to the real story, the main story. I think we're all saying the same thing that we've said for 82 episodes now, or wherever we are, because we always want a little bit more. The background on this magic, or background on this character, or why is this happening?
To reiterate, mystery provokes us to go on a journey to understand.
100%.
Looked like you had something to say, Spencer.
Yeah, I was just going to interject something that I found funny in the books, and that we'll continue to see more of, is Orthos hates flying. And every time they have to fly, he always hides himself in his shell. He doesn't come out until, after they land. To me, it's just kind of a fun little humorous thing that I guess that Will puts in there. This giant fire-breathing turtle dragon thing who keeps telling Lindon to be tough and to move forward, to push through, and yet he's afraid of flying, kind of cowers whenever he has to fly. It's just kind of a funny, humorous, shtick that Will puts in there. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that Orthos says is when he's talking to Lindon, he says, "I wonder what kind of soulsmith can make you a spine." I was like, all right, that's great. And then one time or 2 times, I don't know how many times, because it's written kind of as a general statement, that as they're flying, Orthos keeps to himself in his shell unless he has to go relieve himself. I'm like, so there's a fire-breathing dragon that is relieving himself off of a cloud. That opens up so many questions and so many side stories of like people just minding their business, like, I don't know, hoeing their field, or I don't know, churning butter, whatever they do in this world, right? And a cloud flies by. They're like, oh, one of those flying clouds, and
yeah,
turtle pies.
It's the people who are, oh, the rain's coming. And now it's not rain, though. It burns them like acid because it's from Orthos.
Yeah. Does he have acid poop? Is that ever revealed?
Yes, that's book 17.
Okay.
It's Orthos themed, and it's all about him. The
Right.
good, bad, and the ugly.
We've come to the nucleus of what we would change. We would make Orthos be able to fling poop that is acid and destroy his enemies.
Who's the most annoying character for each of you?
Ooh.
That's not in the main cast.
Oh.
You're welcome.
I didn't really care for any of the Skysworn. Any of them.
They're lawful good. That's why you'd never play a paladin in D&D.
I don't know what those words mean, but
They're the guys who follow all the rules and never break any of them.
oh yeah,
for any
those
reason.
guys.
Yeah, exactly. There it is.
Yeah, the
Point proven.
Skysworn, they're not funny. They're just letter of the law sort of people. Neither of them like Lindon or Yaren. There's never seems to be any sort of positive interaction with them. It's a part of the plot. It's a necessary part of the plot. But to have them not have any positive interaction with the Skysworn is just kind of interesting. None of them are friendly, it seems. They all just are there to serve a specific purpose. So they might be, to me, I guess, maybe the most annoying characters. It seems like in a group of people like the Skysworn, you'd have at least some positive interaction somewhere along the way, but it doesn't appear that, at least from what I can remember.
A plot device and nothing else.
I agree with Spence in the sense that there's no positive interaction with them. And that's why I think I'm just kind of like, with it when it comes to Skysworn. But other than that, I can't say I don't like anybody.
You like Jai Daisho?
Or... He's all right.
He's a dweeb. He's not even powerful enough. He's not even powerful enough to keep himself alive. Forget the thing at the end with the magic item. He can't even keep himself alive and get over being sick by
Why would you want him alive?
I don't want him alive, but like as you advance, it seems like you get sick less. It's not stated, but that's my impression because people don't tend to get sick if they're more powerful in this book because we don't see any examples of it. That's my extrapolation. Of all the things, he just had to play his political prowess a little differently, and he could have probably found healers. If there's a pill to heal your arm, there's a pill to heal his whatever, cancer, something or other. But he couldn't play it right because he was a dweeb. He even went to the Ravens and was like, I need you to kill someone. Here is this stuff that I've been saving from the Emperor. And they're like, okay, name the one you want to kill. Ethan Aurelius. And they're like, nah, he's cool, bro. We Gucci. And he's like, how did you get here before me? He's like, we won't do that. Pick someone else.
Fair. I really don't care about Jai Daisho, whether he's alive, dead, whatever. Is
he only an underlord or is he higher?
I think he's only an underlord.
Well, I think, isn't there... Hopefully I'm not spoiling anything. Isn't there a certain point where if you have enough power, or I should say if you have enough advancement, you don't age? Some of the monarchs have been around for quite a while.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Or is it only once you get to monarch that you don't age?
No, it's somewhere in the higher tiers, I think. Ethan says there's 3 things to become an underlord. It's soul fire, so you have to clear out a space of your soul space. It's like some sort of revelation about yourself, and then I think it's just like amount of power or something like that. I can't remember the third thing. But like I know one of them is like this revelation. And then the same thing for Archlord. Like to become an Archlord, you have to have another form of revelation. And it's like, well, if you're not having that, then you're not trying. Will Wight trying to seed in that everyone should self-reflect to grow themselves. Growth mindset.
Well, speaking of growth, is the size of this episode sufficient for us to land this cloud?
I like to take the cloud and do kind of like a bungee ripcord so that everyone falls out from the sky.
Breaks their legs.
And we see who survives. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds
pretty
fun.
much.
Perfect. Let's do it.
Lead us home, Spencer.
Are you sure you want me to do that?
I always want you to do that.
So as we get into the final bit of the episode here, just some things that we talked about was a little bit of Yaren's growth, seeing more of her backstory. Talked about Machiel and Fate, just a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes. It'd be nice sometimes to see a little bit more, but definitely enough to keep us intrigued as to what's going on behind the scenes. Orthos being funny, where he challenges Lindon a lot, but then sometimes we see him being afraid of flying, which is kind of funny. Some plot points we wish we could have seen a little bit more of a climactic end to the story, but we definitely have enough to keep us intrigued and keep us hooked for the next one. Thanks everyone for listening and subscribing. Hope to see you here next time. And the future book that I want to have us read on the episode is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, who is the author of The Martian. It's a really fun standalone sci-fi book. Near future, I guess you might say. It's a relatively short book, but I think it's super fun and has some interesting themes in it that I would like to explore. So hopefully we'll get to that one soon.
I think we could probably fit it in this year, Jonathan, if we move maybe one of the books that we haven't told the audience about, and they'll never know the difference.